The question is simple. Have any of the systems on my network been compromised? The answer is harder than it should be. Enter AI Hunter. Active Countermeasures has automated and streamlined techniques used by the best pen testers and threat hunters in the industry to create AI Hunter, a network threat hunting solution that does the first pass of a hunt for you to identify systems that are most likely to be compromised and scores the results on a scale from 0 to 100. You can then research those systems in depth with AI Hunter. Focus your valuable time on the systems that need your expertise with AI Hunter. Sign up for a personal demo today at securityweekly.com/ACM. RSA offers business-driven security solutions that provide organizations with a unified approach to managing digital risk and designed to effectively detect and respond to advanced attacks, manage user access control, and reduce business risk, fraud, and cybercrime. For a limited time, get mobile multi-factor authentication from RSA Secure ID Access for free to help secure your remote or dynamic workforce long-term. Leverage push notification, biometric, and one-time password authenticators to secure access to your cloud applications, on-premises systems, legacy systems, privileged accounts, and more at no cost for 6 months. For more information, visit securityweekly.com/RSA Security. Did you know that over 63% of cyber breaches are caused by a third-party vendor? CyberGRX is on a mission to modernize third-party cyber risk management. Built on the market's first third-party cyber risk exchange, CyberGRX arms you with fast and accurate data, a proven and innovative approach, so you can make rapid, informed decisions and confidently engage with partners. Learn how partnering with CyberGRX will help you become cyber certain. Visit securityweekly.com/CyberGRX.
Welcome back to Security and Compliance Weekly. We've been talking to David King about the challenges of taking security into organizations, especially as an auditor or assessor, and especially what it's like to be on the receiving end of that. We talked way too much about NIST in the first segment, so I hope that's behind us. And we're going to talk in this segment a little bit more about some of the things that David's involved in and how he's trying to take this concept of teaching security and compliance, especially to smaller companies that are frankly largely ignored by the security vendors and large consulting firms of the world. Before we jump into that, do have a couple announcements. You can join the Security Weekly mailing list for webcast and virtual training announcements and to receive your personal invite to our Discord server by visiting securityweekly.com/subscribe and clicking the button to join the list. Also, we want to let you know that Security Weekly is ramping up our webcast and technical training schedule for the remainder of 2020. In September, you can find out why traditional data security can't be zero trust, and you can also learn how to reduce the blast radius of your cloud infrastructure. Find this and more at securityweekly.com/webcast to see what we have coming up. And also, of course, always remember for any of our previously recorded webcasts or trainings, you can find those at securityweekly.com/on-demand. All right. I cut David off at the break before he could respond to John Snyder's question, something about explaining security to ancient lawyers and judges and people that don't really have a fundamental understanding or a clue of what you're talking about. At least that's what I got out of it. I don't want to taint the waters, but David, I'll let you respond to John now, and then we can proceed.
Yeah, absolutely. So Jeff, you mentioned before the break that there are personality types when you undergo assessments or audits, and there's certainly a personality type on the IT side, and there's a personality type on the legal side as well, right? Okay. I'm very comfortable speaking on IT speak, as it were, to a degree, even though a lot of that skill set's now atrophied. On the lawyer side, fortunately, cybersecurity regulations are so clear and non-opaque that you can I'm totally joking.
We should call an ambulance. He's obviously having COVID fever.
I'm absolutely joking. That's actually a joke that I began, that's actually one of the things that I start with when we're talking with the legal teams, right? So legally, what's the responsibility here? What are our obligations? Cybersecurity regulations are incredibly opaque. It kind of feels like a blunt instrument where sometimes a scalpel could be used instead. And so I don't mind starting a lot of those conversations with I don't know, but I'm going to show you what I think, and I'm going to need your help in translating my thoughts into legalese, as it were. And so I tend to, try to bring them onto my team to kind of augment the gap that I have with speaking legalese.
Right. And speaking of the team, you more oftentimes than not have to deal with a very small team, and that is maybe one or two people that are dealing with the infrastructure, maybe an executive or two, right? How many times have you taken findings and recommendations to executives of these SMBs and have them look at you and say, that's not an issue, or we're not going to tell anybody about it, or, hey, here's the rug, let me sweep it right under it, right? And pretend that it's not effing there.
So I've presented to boards of directors of publicly traded companies with audit findings related to cybersecurity breaches. That's that posture. I have been exposed to that posture. At the end of the day, though, my goal is to drive value. My goal is in that setting. My goal is not to drive change, right? That's the boards of directors' goal, is to drive action and drive change. My goal is to drive value. And if they see that, at the very least, I make a point to where they can see the value of my findings, and it's up to them as to whether or not they want to do something with it. And I don't take personal umbrage to that at all.
Yeah, that's interesting because, you waited too long. I jumped in.
I shut up. It's all yours, Jeff. Go for it.
When I would present results, especially back when I was doing more assessments, security assessments, vulnerability assessment work, what some people call pen tests, I always thought it was important to, you have to share what's wrong, what you found, what you did, offer solutions. I always tried to give them choices, give them options. And there was usually the option hidden in there somewhere, sort of between the gold, platinum, and silver choices, which generally meant how much money are they going to spend. I tried to push what I thought was probably the best solution for them. But at the end of the day, it was up to them, whoever was on the receiving end. Usually it was C-level people. Sometimes it was a board of the customer we were working for. But at the end of that, I felt comfortable walking away if I felt like I gave them the choices, gave them all the information so that they could make an informed decision. And whatever that informed decision ended up being, whether I agreed with it or not wasn't as important as I felt like, okay, well, at least they had all the information. I've done what I could do to sort of steer them in the right direction. Have you seen that in your career as well, David?
Absolutely. I mean, I recognize swim lanes, right? So I stay in my lane, but everyone that's swimming in this pool, we're all part of a team together, right? So,
although Josh is usually the one doggy paddling, but go on.
I want to hit you. Look, let me ask you a question as long as I've got the mic for a second.
It's the bald head. It makes him more aerodynamic in the water.
Oh, Jesus. It's just
a flotation device.
So, it's interesting. You worked in investment houses, and then you moved. You never really moved out of your swim lane, if you'll excuse me stealing that, but you moved where you did the swim lane, from investment to SMBs, all kinds of places like that. But I mean, back when you were with investors, hedge funds, and everybody else under the sun, what did you see in this world, in this compliance world, in the security world, that was there anything that made investors go, that's interesting in a bad way?
Yeah, I think within the past 3 to 5 years, I've seen a lot of concern around vendor risk and third-party risk management. I think is a valid trend that companies are starting to see more and more of. I think that companies are practicing cybersecurity due diligence a lot more with their business partners, which is awesome on one hand and so horrible on the other, in that they release these third-party due diligence questionnaires that are.
God.
Right, you just said a bad word.
Right. So
questionnaires,
multi-page workbooks where most of the stuff is kind of bastardized from some weird framework that isn't even applicable to this business relationship. So why do we even have to there isn't a lot of attention being paid. While there's a lot of attention being paid over third-party vendor risk management, there's not a lot of attention paid on the applicability of said third party. And that parties, but what I mean by applicability is that independent third parties compliance responsibilities or regulatory responsibilities for your relationship. I'm a fan of the PCI data security standard to a point.
My brother. Oh, to a point. Go ahead.
So a lot of my PCI attestations were married together on engagements with SOC 2 attestations, because a lot of my clients were, I'm going to use a broad term, data centers, right? But they're service providers on a more technical side.
Yep.
And the biggest flaw that I see in DSS is, yes, DSS does require, and it's always overlooked. Always is too strong a term, but it's mostly overlooked. The customer responsibility matrix should be the Bible that the attestation is reviewed under, right? So even before starting an engagement, I should be able to go to a vendor and say, hand me your customer responsibility matrix, and I'm going to drive the applicability of the DSS standard at the sub-control level to your responsibility to your customer. And
that's sensible. Jeff, would you disagree or agree with that? I think that's very sensible.
I just want to know what compliance like standard he's talking about, Jeff.
No, it's very sensible, and don't miss what he's saying, that it's in the DSS, but it's often missed and overlooked. There's a lot in the DSS that's subtle, that gives organizations tremendous opportunities to pass with flying colors and do things much better and do it completely securely, and they miss it because they don't have a good auditor or assessor, or they're doing it themselves, or they're making it.
Did you hear completely securely? Did somebody hear completely? I swear, I heard somebody do completely securely. I've never heard that before. I don't think it's possible. I don't. Do we need to have another Jeff sticker? Is that 2 Jeff stickers in one episode?
All right, and are you talking about the initial?
I gotta go for the trifecta now.
No, in all seriousness, Jeff, I got to agree with you, but I want to throw one idea out there.
Mutually exclusive. Sure, go ahead.
Bear with me for 1 second. I want to throw one idea out there, and that was a really lovely piece that you said, David, which is that the shared responsibility model, you're going to the vendor and going, what's the responsibility that you have? What's the responsibility that your customer has? Let me drive the control testing. Let me drive the discussions, everything off of who's responsible for what. And it's not just PCI DSS. There's also, anything cloud-based. There's the shared responsibility model. We've been talking about that for years now. There's all of these things are derived on who's responsible for X, Y, and Z. And I love the way you put that. I'm going to drive the assessment, the audit off of those things. So
yeah, but
that was
everybody's
lovely.
going to try and push the responsibility off of their doc. It's not just as simple as saying who's responsible for what. It's the real question is who is accountable for what.
Oh, you know, we should do a racy sheet, a racy chart.
Thank you for bringing that up, Scott, because I wanted to interject, because I've had probably 3 engagements in the last couple months of, my day job customers that have been these service providers, and
this has been an ad for online business systems.
PCI starts with a merchant, somebody selling something, and then they have a service provider. Let's say it's an e-commerce site, so there's a hosting provider, web application provider, and then there's a payment processor on the back end. Maybe all of this is being hosted at a hosting provider. So, there's typically 2 or 3 players, and I've had a couple instances now where the customer's been different people in this sort of 3-layered approach. But what I am seeing as they are going out about the responsibilities matrix the way they always have, and this is a caution, so pay attention, and it sort of extends to what Scott was saying. As you're looking at the responsibility matrix, it's very important not to look at it from your viewpoint only. I'm the service provider, I'm the middleman, all I'm going to do is this little piece, and somebody else is doing everything else. And depending on your viewpoint or perspective determines what you logically say you're doing or not doing in terms of all the requirements. Right. While that's legitimate and is often happening, and I've seen this a couple times now, it often ends up meaning that from everybody's individual perspective, there's 1 or 2 or 3 very significant requirements that everybody logically says, that's not my problem, and then it ends up not getting done. The way you solve that is you've got to look at the responsibilities matrix always from the perspective of the merchant, because they're the ones on the front line responsible for compliance, attesting to the compliance, which some like me call security. They're the ones that are going to be the first in line getting in trouble when there's a breach. They're going to be the ones mentioned in I used to say newspaper headlines. Now I say Krebs on security. You've got to look at it from their viewpoint. This is what they're responsible for. And if they're passing stuff off to a third party and you're that third party, even though you can logically say, well, it's not really my job, they expect it's your job. And hopefully you're the merchant negotiating and making sure that the third party, because nobody's going to do it voluntarily. And I've had customers that are the middleman saying, yeah, but that's not our problem technically. I'm like, well, it isn't today, but if a breach happens, it's all going to come down to there was a reasonable expectation that you should have been doing this.
Right. But Mr. Jeff Mann and Mr. Dave King, my company filled out the SAQD in the years between 1,200 questions of I answer no, the whole question is invalidated. We did everything we needed to do for accountability. Why aren't we PCI compliant?
You just checked all the boxes. You didn't do a thing.
Right. Well,
checkbox security. Go ahead, Dave.
Yeah. So I think in every audit, attestation, assessment, engagement, scoping is the most important meeting, right? That's hands down, that's the most important meeting. When my client is a service provider, I ask in the scoping meeting that we bring in the head of the marketing team or the head of the sales team. And, PCI, and I think that this is a significant gap in DSS, is that as assessors, we're never asked to look at what our clients are selling to the merchant in this case, on the service provider side. So I think that it's not enough to have a CRM or customer responsibility matrix. We need to know at an intimate level how their service is being sold. Because in every meeting that I've had, where I've had the marketing team here and the IT team here, which most of the time, this is the first time that they've ever been in a meeting together at all.
Yeah, we do that too.
I've had instances where we've had to reschedule the meeting because there was a blow up in the first one, right? There was like we are not on, the company is not on the same page with the scope of this attestation. because what's being sold to their customers and what's been sold to their customers for years is not what IT's understanding of what's being sold is, right? And
we've seen monolithic companies that don't know how to control their data. They don't know what they're being charged for. They don't know what they're selling to their clients. They don't know what third parties are utilizing their data for their own gains without paying anything back, right? So you are 100% correct in that initial meeting is the most important to scope it. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, because you don't understand applicability, and then as an auditor / assessor, now I run the risk of asking questions and applying, and pressure testing certain controls against my client that are actually inapplicable. And I've been an auditee, and that's really painful as an auditee to try to answer an auditor's question where the question itself is inapplicable. Right now, all of a sudden, we're just talking two different languages. They're Latin derivative languages, but we're talking two completely different languages here. So I think, on the PCI side, I think the best thing that they could do to kind of support the CRM is to also assess the literature that's of the service that's being sold to the client.
Well, I was going to say, David, it's okay to talk to marketing about what they're selling, but at the end of the day, it's what's in their contract or service level agreement or whatever they're calling what it is contractually that they're doing on behalf of their customers. And that's where we usually take a look in terms of helping our customers fill out their responsibilities matrix from the perspective, especially when they're the service provider and they're kind of in the middle. It just depends on whether you're working with the merchant or whether you're working with whatever layer of service provider you're working with. Hey, I want to shift gears a little bit here because we only have a few minutes left. And David, I want to give you the opportunity to tell us a little bit about this Cyber Support Alliance that you're affiliated with, also Governing Goliath. We're kind of intrigued to find out what that is. And as time allows, if you could maybe mention Jot and Tittle.
Sure. Thanks for the opportunity to do that. Last year, a little over a year ago, I started, a small advisory company called Cyber Support Alliance. And my target client is are family-owned businesses and nonprofits, typically of less than 10 people. And I feel like it's just you talked about the poverty line, the cybersecurity poverty line before, where you have these small businesses that just can't afford, high dollar cybersecurity consultants. Even if they have no compliance obligations, there's still an element of risk, both from wire fraud transfer, fraudulent wire transfers, and from ransomware that I've seen firsthand close these businesses. And it's devastating to see a small family-owned business close. Honestly, it's even more devastating to see a nonprofit close as a result of a ransomware attack or fraudulent wire transfer, because it's not just the employees that are affected when that business closes; it's the beneficiaries, that are affected as well. And these are beneficiaries that are already kind of bad off in the first place that need help, right? So it's heartbreaking. So a few years ago, I kind of hit a state of financial independence, and I was just like, so what do I really want to do when I grow up? And I want to do something that matters, and I want to stay relevant in this field that I'm so passionate about. So that's why I started CSA, and I really just cherry pick. I cherry pick my own customers. I get a lot of opportunities, but I pretty much don't make any money off of the effort. I just cherry pick my clients based on what I feel like their need and their risk is. And, again, if I can drive value, I'm not just driving value focus on driving value to someone's business anymore. I'm focused on driving value to their life. And I find that's just very rewarding to me. But but you can only do so much if you're only tackling, one small business or one small nonprofit at a time. And by the way, as a rule, I only have one client at a time, and I don't pick up any new engagements until my last engagement closes. So, you can't really grow. There's no progressive growth with that type of business model. So that's why I started Governing Goliath Media at the beginning of this year. Was really, I just want to create and publish content that's meaningful, that people that don't, do the cybersecurity speak or the compliance speak, that maybe they're not even business owners, maybe they're just employees. But I would just want to find some way to add value to where they can kind of start thinking about cybersecurity on a more personal lens. And hopefully that translates into risk addressed with their employer, right? So if I can kind of get people thinking more on, well, here's the cybersecurity headline, or here's this Brian Krebs article. How does that breach affect me, right? Specifically, how does that affect me? And then I think if we can kind of convert people's mindsets to being more selfish when they read these headlines, then it'll translate to them being a little more risk conscious at their employer. I can talk about jot and tittle for a sec too. I don't want to hog all the time here.
No, go for it.
Any questions for Dave about his adventures, or he can mention what seems like it's kind of cool, jot and tittle. Go for jot and tittle then.
Okay. So jot and tittle, I've just been really blessed in my career that I've, with every employer, I've just found a mentor. And it wasn't something I was purposefully trying to do, maybe subconsciously, but my mentor at UHY Advisors is David Barton. And this guy just has a plethora of knowledge on all things IT audit, governance, risk, and compliance. And we were going into this engagement, and he said, I want you to leave no jot nor tittle unturned. And my team and I, we were just like, what the hell is he talking about? Like, is this some type of, what type of audit speak is he talking about? Tell us more. So it turns out. It
was all Greek to you, is what you're saying.
Right. It's all
Greek. Latin.
Right. It's all Latin. So it turns out that phrase is an ancient biblical audit reference, where a jot is a word that we actually still use to this day, right? It's a shorthand note. We jot something down. And a tittle is the name of the dot that's at the top of a lowercase I. So the current phrase is make sure that all your I's are dotted and your T's are crossed. So that's what he was saying when he was like, go into this audit, look at all the footnotes, look at the actual signatures. And so I thought it would be really funny to create a comic strip where the auditors' names were Jot and Tittle. And so I created a website, jotandtittle.com, where you can find out a little more information. And I started and it's just as I'm inspired to, as I see a news event, or as I have a client interaction, if I can think of how to turn this into something that that drives value and is funny, then I'll create a comic strip about it. In preparation for this call, for example, I've got this one strip where the auditors are saying they're going up to the IT guy and they're saying, we need to see the code you used to generate those reports that we requested. He says, why? And they say, well, because the AICPA standards require us to gain assurance that the results we receive are complete and accurate. And he says, okay. And then he says, how can I gain assurance that you know how to read the code? And, it's just, that was an actual conversation that I had, a few years ago. And I thought that it just, be a way of kind of adding a little bit of humor and adding a little bit of adding a little bit of value to both the IT side of the house and the IT audit side of the house there. So, it's just one of those funny little things I do. And for all my colleagues, every year I put the comic strips on, I have a Zazzle store, so I just put the comic strips on coffee cups and I send the coffee cups out to all my clients. And, it's just kind of like a neat little gimme that I do there. But governing Goliath is something that I'm, as a medium and as a YouTube channel is something I'm really passionate about. I've never done media really before, especially to this magnitude. So I'm still learning every day on it. There's a lot of SEO stuff that I'm still trying to get acquainted with, but I really want to compile a very deep lake of content that, eventually can turn into something else, maybe a book, maybe a series of books. I'm definitely interested in already doing a good bit of public speaking engagements on that platform. It's just a big passion of mine.
Well, that's super. For our listening audience, if you want to find out about any of these endeavors that David's involved with, you can find links in our show notes on our wiki page. David, I want to thank you for joining us today. We've certainly enjoyed the conversation, and I feel compelled to say to you, I would trade cigar and whiskey for a custom jot and tittle strip that somehow works in Security and Compliance Weekly, or at least me.
Good idea.
So we'll see what you can come up with. As I said, thanks.
All of us, not just you, Jeff. All of us.
Yeah, all of us.
Come on. Yeah, it should be all of us. Yes.
That's fair.
That's fair. The show is nothing without the whole gang.
I mean, if he was really going to do that, an accurate description would be you running around in circles with your head on fire yelling, PCI, 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 PCI.
And everybody else standing around with buckets of water, not throwing them on. Yeah,
and the buckets have like holes in them, so the water's draining out onto the floor. So when they do go
bottles of whiskey, and we're throwing them on you, but it just makes the flames higher because we like good whiskey.
It's an easy way to light a cigar. I mean, let's be honest.
All right, I think officially this is the first time that the wheels have come off on this show. So I feel like we've reached a new higher plane. That's going to wrap it for us today. Please join us next week. I think we're talking to a company called Ansible next week. We'll be on the Discord server. Don't forget to spend your $10 and sign up for B-Sides Boston. That's going to do it for us. Stay secure, stay compliant. Over and out.